Hello and welcome to the Backbench Masterclass. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Ashok, who is the founder and CEO of STAG Software. I'd like to start off by thanking you, Mr. Ashok, for accepting our invite to come on the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here and pleasure knowing you.
Uh, I'd like to start off by asking you the most important question that we ask all of our guests. Were you a backbencher in school or college?
I guess I am probably not going to do justify the name of your podcast because I unfortunately was a front bencher. That doesn't necessarily make me studious. It just makes me afraid of the backbenchers.
So, where did you study?
I studied the first 5 years I spent in Trichy. So I studied in a school in Trichy, YMCA and Campion. And subsequently, the last 5 to 10, I was in St. Germain's, Bangalore. And then went to Christ for 11th and 12th, which was PUC at that time. Then went to Guindy Engineering College for my bachelor's electronics and communication. Worked for about 15 years, then did a long distance education with IIT Chicago, which is Indiana Institute of Tech at Chicago. That was virtual. That was in 2000, 15 years after I finished.
So, when did you start working then, sir? And how did your career begin?
I finished in 85 in because we were the second 4 year batch. I started off in 1986. And at that time, I was very keen on computer science, but we didn't have computer science, and the college started 1 year later, so it was electronics then. But I think I spent more time in the library understanding computer science and programming, and therefore I was very clear that I didn't want to go fiddle around with electronics, and landed up in a software company then, a company called Sunray Computers, working with their. At the time, it was all of Unix and stuff like those, which were brand new. You remember, it was just the beginning of PC, and it was really the age of mini computers then. And then subsequently went on to Hewlett Packard division of Blue Star, then moved on to another company called Veripon, where I spent about the last 10 years. Approximately about 15 years later into my career, I started this company called Stag.
So, where did the idea to start Stag come from?
The idea was probably because of the fact that I had a fantastic time in this previous company called Verifone, which is a payments company, which I'm quite sure you possibly know. Whenever you swipe a card, you might find a small little box, which now you got a lot more. That's what the company was. They set up one of the first offshore center in Bangalore way back in 89. And that's when I joined them as part of the initial team. Um, I'm not a tester or a QA or anything. I'm just a software engineer, which like to call because that's how we were in the 80s, so to speak. It just so happened there was an interesting person who found an interesting problem with my software. And remember on those days, we didn't have Windows. We had simple, softwares which had command line or what you call as DOS style prompt. So one of the common messages that would be there whenever you want to go to the next screen would be say, press any key to continue, which I don't think you know because it's a UI, interface has changed. So that wonderful person who apparently donned the role of a tester, which was not really a profession then, pressed caps lock. And I'm quite sure you know what happens when you press a caps lock. Nothing happens. There light burns. If there is a light on the keyboard, or if it's one of those, we'll just make it. And then she filed an issue saying that, look, I pressed any key to continue. Any key could mean any key. So I pressed caps lock, num lock, and all that. Nothing happened. And that really frustrated the heck out of me. And I said, this is the most idiotic way that you would ever test. This is unintelligent. And then that became my mission. And that's how Stag happened.
So, if why did you essentially pick why did you niche down on quality assurance as compared to going on like a full stack development route?
Oh, 15 years I spent in hardcore development. So it is not that
All
I
right.
was, I had any religious, so to speak, a connection to assurance. And I said, hey, testers are greater than or some. All the notions of these dichotomy are more new in nature. At that time, we were just good software engineers who wanted to write great code. Right? That's all our objective was. You can call yourself developer in the morning and tester in the evening and analyst in the afternoon and so on and so forth. But when somebody started doing these kinds of testing, I was really upset. And when we started seeing some issues and my manager said, hey, this is crazy, then I said, if this is the way you test, this is going to be a problem. Then as a hot-headed young man, I said, what we do is nonsense, like every hot-headed young man, right? And he was a fantastic boss. And he said, "Hey, if you have a problem, you want to fix it." I said, "I need a few $1 million to fix it." And this was way back about 30 years ago. And he said, "Take the money." And I said, "But you should not interfere in what I do. Because if I say it's bad, you should respect it." And that's how it started. And then I got into process aspects of quality. Got into product aspects of quality. And because I came in from that background of a hardcore development, I understood that quality is not something that is superficial. It's very deeply internal in the technology, the systems. And that's why there is a very strong engineering bent that I have when it comes to testing. So to me, it is quite different what people perceive today, because we all like to be, kind of straight jacketed into, are you a tester? Are you an analyst? Are you a scrum master? Are you whatever, marketeer? At that time, it was like you specialized in something, but you were broad enough to do a lot of other things. So I still hold that and cherish that idea deeply. So I don't, if you ask me, are I a tester? I would say I'm just a good software engineer from a technical standpoint.
So it's like that saying. I mean, a lot of people know the incomplete one, but the whole thing of jack of all trades, master of none is still better than a master of one.
I don't know if it's a master of none. You have to be probably deep enough in something, but you can't ignore breadth. So I've
Yeah.
always had this wonderful notion of yin and yang that I profess and practice in variety of different things. And yin and yang can be said in many, many ways. One of the ways to look at it is in terms of depth and breadth. So you need to have certain depth in something that you do, something that you deeply connect with. But then if you kind of go all the way down, then you will be sitting in a hole deep down, which, unless there is a very specific need for you to be that, may not work in the real context and real world. So you need to have certain amount of breadth. So to me, that breadth and depth is one of those magical things to say how far do you want to go and how broad do you want to go. And it's a lifelong journey to me. And breadth does not mean even technology. It means, into technology, to humanities, to a variety of different arts and stuff. So that's how I view the whole piece. So the word called master of none, truly you'll be master of nothing, because mastership itself is a fairly deep word. Where do you know where the end is?
That's true, sir. That's true. What are some of the toughest moments in your journey while building Stag, and how did you get through them?
I mean, initial, like everybody else, I was not, at that point in time, I was not very keen on trying to seek money from somebody else. I wanted to certainly be very simply and organic. And the reason for that was fairly simplistic. The simplistic thing was, I only do what I like, and I like what I do. And that's a very complicated combination when it comes to business, because in business you might have to do a lot of things that you don't like. But then if I hold these twin thoughts very deeply, then I have to be careful in how much I can control. And if I have to control, I have to obviously be, reasonably independent in terms of financial aspects. So some of the toughest moments, therefore, is always about worrying about the notion of cash flow and staying that balance in what you do. Uh, and the worry of the cash flow is one of those that was constantly there. But then I would say it just helps you to be more sharper. Second was, there was a couple of interesting legal issues from a variety of different aspects which came, which both of which we won. But then those are worrisome moments, because I am from an engineering background, not from other background of legality. And so I'm used to a certain clear notion of logic and clear notion of yes or no. And a lot of the other professions aren't like that. Right? It's not an exact black and white. There's a lot of grays. And those grays were tough for me to initially deal with. Now I think I understand grays far better.
So it's again, I mean, like, it's a lot of the challenges you faced were not from like a technical standpoint, but from
Oh, no, no.
stuff on like the macro side.
Yeah. Technical standpoint, it's a given thing that when you do anything technical, there has to be problems, because in whatever discipline that you're working with, there has to be something brand new that you end up doing, and you always obviously will encounter a problem. So that is not a worrisome piece, because the whole idea, when I call the notion of depth, is the confidence that you have that you can solve it. But when you go into the breadth part, where there are things beyond your knowledge, your education, so to speak, which could be things which could be related to financial aspects or legal aspects or people aspects and stuff like those, they are interesting, because that's now a moment of learning and solving at the same time. And that is where I think we all graduate when we become from doing technical stuff to running some kind of a business in any form, because a lot of it is not taught. And teaching to me is about the ability to have the confidence to solve any problem.
What's one most valuable lesson that you've learned in like these decades of the experience that you've gained?
One valuable experience, is it?
Yeah, like your most valuable lesson, if you were to have, let's say, one guiding principle that you would pass on as a piece of advice to someone just starting off like their journey in entrepreneurship, what would it be?
I mean, one thing that yeah, well, maybe there is probably not one, maybe there is about two or three of them. One, belief, an extreme sense of dogged sense of belief in what you do, however stupid it may seem to others. Number one. Second, it must convert into something meaningfully valuable as perceived by you. Number two, a tremendous amount of trust in the people whom you work with the customers, the ecosystem at large. Right? Trust. The ability to be constantly frank and being honest and telling if that is good is great, if it's terrible is horrible. Right? And the notion of constantly being critical about yourself doesn't mean that what you do is great. Permanently critical. And lastly, damn it, enjoy. Because it's not about a business in terms of trying to change the world or making money. If you don't enjoy it, the whole thing doesn't come. So that's something that I very, very deeply. And lastly, of course, I think is persist and adapt. Adapts constantly every day because that's the natural way of living. So these to me are what have been my philosophy, if you will, which I've always and permanently gradually. Some of them will fail over time, but just because a couple of times fails doesn't mean I stop doing that.
So you've like when you started off again, like this is just something like deviating a bit off topic. When you started off, AI was not big, but in 2025, we're approaching 26 now. AI is everywhere. How has AI affected your industry?
You know. So let me do maybe a 30-second going back in time in respect to AI. AI is not as new as you think it is. It is 1950, by the way. And in fact, my college project at that time, as part of my final year, was on AI,
All
but
right.
the different AI, not generative AI, right? So it was basically the software which at that time I think got an interesting award from the Computer Science of India presentation then, which was a pan India presentation that we had to do to compete, was about adding natural language to reserve a train. Remember, we have IRCTC now, which
Yeah.
well, so that was just a college kind of a project where you say, how do you talk to the system and make a booking? That was our project. We are three of us. So, but so the AI has been fairly deeply into the system in terms of interest and studying and so on at that time. But the biggest shift that occurred probably today is quite different because it's far more generative in nature, the idea of LLM, etc. Now, coming to the real question, of what you're asking, what does it do today to my discipline? Right? Anything that is physically execution oriented that can be done in a reasonably rote fashion is probably superiorly done by AI. That's number one. So, a conventional notion of how people have learned to think about testing today as something as coming up with some test cases and executing and finding bugs is impasse in my opinion. Because what we need to kind of look at is, I'm more looking at it from the perspective of the quality is about not just finding an issues, it is about intellectual visualization of what is right, what is wrong, what could be done better, what could be further needed. It's not anymore a doing activity. And that intellectual visualization is much more deeper than a physical AI. It's kind of a mental craftsmanship to me. And the final part of that entire shift is if I can connect with humans and their experience, business and the value, and society and trust, and keep those three yardsticks, then my notion of quality and assurance is elevated. And unless we make that transition, I would lose my job as far as testing is concerned, which is what I'm now advocating right now.
Yeah. So coming to a bit more, coming to a few questions that are again related specifically to Stag.
Mhm.
You've coined the term hybist for your method.
Mhm.
What does it mean in plain English?
Oh, plain English, it's hypothesis based immersive session testing. Kinds of two sets of words hypotheses to enable scientific thinking. That means when you want to test something, to evaluate something, you hypothesize what can go wrong and then prove and disprove it. So that's scientific thinking, which means testing has to be converted into an engineering science, which unfortunately has not been in vogue in practice. That's part one. Second, that is the thinking part. The thinking part has to be balanced with the great doing part. And doing part is not a mechanical notion of doing. That immersive session is about saying, how can I be very immersed, be in a flow, be very mindful of what I do in very short burstish sessions. So that is the human side. So there is a very deep technical angle to it from the hypothesis side, which is the first part of the word. The second part is the immersive session type testing, where you say, I am going to be so immersed that I don't even know that I'm talking to you, kind of stuff, right? So that's the human side to it. So together, the ability of the mental energy and the physical involvement, so to speak, is what ultimately allows us to see the unseen inside the unseen of the software, because software is invisible. And bugs, what do you mean? You can't see them, right? So how do you find the unseen in the invisible is a very serious challenge, technically speaking. So when you put it in that context, testing is not just pressing the buttons in the UI or pulling a cable somewhere and stuff like that. It's far more meaningful and far more valuable. So that is the background for Hybest. But Hybest is probably in its fifth generation or fifth generation today, because the idea started off somewhere in the 2000 approximately. It's called by a different name. It has evolved, and become basically more and more simplified over time. And that's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to build an AI assistant to enable this implementation of a personal methodology. So it's a personal methodology to help you do smart assurance, is what we call.
So could you tell us a bit more about that, the personal AI assistant that you're building?
See, today when we look at AI, we can look at AI as something that allows me to do a job. So maybe you can say, hey, clean up this text, find something, do some computation and stuff. That's the straightforward. The second kind of it, it is more of an assistive nature, right? It kind of says, what questions can it help me figure out? What kind of path should I possibly go into? So, to me, the notion of assurance, and when you look at assurance, it's more of a deep probing exercise. And probe does not mean that you end. When you asked me about depth a few minutes ago, I said depth has no end. So, probing is also no end. You can keep on probing. The question is, you will run out of time and money at some point. So, you have to be intelligent enough to do meaningful stuff. That's where the value orientation comes in. So when we say probing, we need to look at how do I come up with good probes that are effective, and how do I probe effectively, right? So there is a notion of efficiency and effectiveness built into the idea of probing. So when we say probe, what do you mean? It's in the context of intellectual ability of probing, into serious questioning, observing, adapting, adjusting. So this assistant to me is such a tool that which has kind of assimilated my methodology today, which allows me to think, and therefore helps me by formulating certain questions. If I given a spec and it says, hey, I think you might want to look at this, you might want to clarify this, maybe this is missing, and therefore help me strategize, plan, design, etc. Unlike a lot of other tools where they claim, you given the spec, I will write test cases, I will execute it, which I don't really bite, because testing is not just a standard notion of press the button or run the cases kind of stuff. So that is what this is assisted. So to me, it's a collaborative, eh, obviously you can't call it human, a collaborative system, a collaborative fellow who will help me think better and do better in the entire stuff. That's what I'm trying to build now.
So I have a question. So again, you're like, what Stack does is like quality assurance for tech. Why are is there like any particular reason why companies just don't do that in house as compared to you?
Oh, no, there is a lot of companies which do in-house. Right. Probably if you go back 25 years ago, that might have been popular. In fact, the one of the earliest, probably the first test group that we set up in Bangalore, that I know for sure in Bangalore, I'm quite sure it was probably true for most of India then, was our group in Verifone, which is what I set up then. It was an independent
Yeah.
group. At that time, we were about 30 odd people, so to speak. It was a product company and so on. Now, somewhere after about 2000 or so, I think the idea of an independent QA kind of happened, and as Agile took off, the notion of independent QA also tapered off, which means people said, look, maybe we should have one group which does software development, right? So it does not, this is not true that they don't do and therefore I am doing it for them. So I used to do three things primarily, and I still do about two of them at this point in time. One is if there's a product company which says, look, I want you to test, it does not necessarily mean they don't have you do it. It just means you can add value to them in addition to what they do, because that's what you do for a living, right? So, which means there might be a QA team, they may not have a QA team. If they don't have a QA team, I can do it for them. If they have a QA team, maybe add value in doing something a little more deeply. Number two is working with them to improve the practice of how they do, which is consulting, advisory, and implementation in the true sense. Third is teaching and changing mindsets of people and do. So the last two I do now, I don't do any more actual services. So the short answer is product companies need to have a certain quality group, but though it is changing today because the perception is some of the AI will replace it, so I don't need those chaps. And I think it's in a way good thing, because if you're not value adding in your role, which I think is kind of happening in the testing arena, you should lose your job. And therefore it's happening, which I'm in some sense glad, because you need to get back the value, and we have become more um, thinner over time, because anybody and everybody has learned something and then claimed to be a tester. So the answer is, it is not that they don't have, they very much have, but there is a major shift that is happening, more so because of deeper technologies and the AI also. And testers sometimes think, a lot of the general mass of testers think they don't need to understand technology, which is a terrible misnomer.
So you mentioned, you just now mentioned about a value creation from from like a tester standpoint, and like a lot of the podcasts that we've done, or even the ones that like I've come across of tech people speaking, value is a word that they've constantly used in like a broader sense of entrepreneurship and business. What is value to you?
See, value to a business is only two simple things, because most of the times business understands only money, right? So when you look at money, there are only two numbers that all the people worry about from the business context: the revenue and the profit, right? So if you just convert it into one simple unidimensional notion of value, which is especially as important in the context of businesses, if what you're doing, does that help you gain more revenue? If what you do, does it improve your profit, right? Now, to make both of these things happen, one, there must be some fundamental use to the customer's customer. So if I buy something from you, and if I am not able to benefit from that and offering a higher quality of something or higher productivity of something to my customers, then if it doesn't improve that, then I don't think your tool or your product or whatever is of value to me. So which means when we say value, it is about saying, does it enable your customer's customer to do anything better? Right. The second, this is the business context of quality, which I think you can't forget at any point in time. Then you can extrapolate it and expand it and say, value in the context of a larger context of society and technology and all other stuff, people and stuff. But that, I think, in the business context, first is always about this. So if you're not sharp about that, then I would simply ask you, why should I buy it? Why should I use it?
So did you think that you could have as successfully solved this problem or this opportunity that you came across without being this close to the industry? Like, let's say you had, you obviously went down, you had like a lot of tech experience, but you came across this problem of like bad testing or problems with testing because you came across this while you were doing something on it yourself. Do you think you would have been able to like build and scale Stack to the level that you have today if this is just something that a friend would have told you about, as not something that you would have actually encountered yourself?
I guess at the end of the day, in whatever we build, something becomes deeper and bigger, so to speak, only when you have a very strong belief in what you're trying to do. So either the belief should come from your personal experience, or it should have been something that you've seen and you've been affected by it very, very deeply. right? It cannot be a a casual passing by kind of a story, and I have the same level of, because I have to kind of resonate with it deeply, because there's going to be a lot of times when in the business where you're going to really ask yourself, why the hell am I doing it, right?
Yeah.
And that those questions constantly come. Why did I not continue with something better? I had and so unless there is a very deeper connection to this whole piece, it's not going to happen. So to me, that deeper connection happened more from a personal experience of saying, see, people are so, they are abusing it. And we should, it is in our matter as a good software engineer to deliver great code. And it's sinful if you don't do it. And therefore, you feel for it deeply and say, look, what can I do about it and how can I contribute in my own fashion? So, to me, if you ask me, could I have done anything differently? No. But if I'm affected by it equally well, then maybe I would have done the same thing. But
So is that
if I
a
don't believe in it,
reason?
I don't touch it.
So is that a reason you've been in this space from the past 40 years as compared to pivoting into new things?
Probably I value depth a little more deeply, and maybe I'm old school in some sense. But the question is, I think a lot of people kind of get bored, right? And to me, the sense what you call as bored is not because you exhausted something. You are probably discovering something more nicer because you are digging deeper, you're digging broader, and if that makes it fun, it's fine. But I adapt every time. So what I might have told a few years ago and what I tell when you ask me about a few things, but might be diametrically opposite. So I think there is a certain deep notion that I attach to a few things, and I'm terribly consistent with some of those.
So what role do you think obsession plays while building?
Important, very important. Obsession may be construed as a little negative, but as long as you look at it from a positive sense and say persistence, I think it's so. To me, most of these are endurance because that's something that I do aside of my business. I'm a hardcore endurance person. I do extreme long cycle rides. I do long distance ultra running. So those are some things that I do very, very deep, those I cherish a lot. So I know that a lot of things, require a long-term endurance for a lot of stuff. So that kind of rubs it in my business too.
So could you tell us a bit more about that? Like when did you get started with that, or was it something you were into since you were a child?
Oh, I wish. No, I think, whatever cycling was done with at the college time, and then you started off work and you spend more time in the office because you were trying to learn. So I guess in those times we used to go every Saturday. We also used to work on Saturday, not because anybody wanted us, because we were trying to learn and figure out a few things. And so it kind of went on. I think somewhere when I became like what, maybe 40, maybe closer to 50, I think 48 or so. I saw this wonderful shiny cycle that was imported. It was going through in Bangalore. I said, "Wow, that's cute. That's really nice." Went to the shop, and then the guy said, "It's 20K." And he said, "20K for this cycle is too much." And he said, "Just ride." And then I rode. It was so wonderful to ride, and then I got hooked into it, and that's been now 2012 onwards. And then you do this 10 kilometer, 20 kilometer, etc. Then it slowly became 100, then it became 200, then it became 500, 600. I mean, I say hundreds and towards, I mean non-stop rides. So you don't stop.
Yeah.
Basically, you just stop for food and stuff. So I got into what is called breves, and I do that very actively now. So the longest ride has been about 1,200 kilometers. And somewhere along the way, I thought, oh, to do cycling longer distances, maybe I should do running. And both of them are two different sports. Didn't understand then. And then I started running, and I said, oh, let's do a marathon, let's do an ultra. And that's how I got into it. And both of them stuck. And so that's how they are. So I commute. I'm a hardcore commuter. So I didn't just do sport. I commute. So that's how I travel in Bangalore all the day. I visit customers. I go to office. I go to meetings. Sometimes there's a meeting outside Bangalore. I cycle there. So that's part of my life now. So that's the fun part. So that's what keeps me alive.
So there's depth to everything that you've picked up in life.
I think it happens because you're interested in it, not
Yeah.
because you're doing in the extra. You just, you persist in it, and there's a little. And to me, it's always this, the tiny 1% growth improvement, right? It's not like a magical thing happens. It's a little, 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 which compounds over time. As my son says, hey, it's all about compounding because he's in the finance business. So I understand the power of compounding from the finance, but then to me, it's about how do you compound in what you do so that you become good in what you do and therefore can influence a lot more interesting people.
On a lighter note, sir, do you wish that you would have gotten into this maybe 30 years back when Bangalore traffic was not as bad and the roads were a lot better?
Certainly, it'd be a wish, but I normally don't go back either in history because or look at the future because I'm a very, very present person. So, which means, yeah, it certainly would have been nicer because I grew up in Bangalore. I spent nearly now it's about 50 years plus in Bangalore in and out, but I've known Bangalore from 73 onwards. So certainly those were brilliant and lovely times. But I guess that's part of the evolutionary cycle. You got to live with it. Um, but I don't regret.
So how has Bangalore evolved? Like the tech industry in Bangalore, how has that changed since when you started off to where it is today?
See, I think when we started, see, I think the initial set of tech companies came in somewhere about 84, 85, and maybe not 85, maybe 86, 87, somewhere around that. So I joined this company, which I think at the time was the third company which came into Bangalore then. And that was in 89. And they were all product companies. There was no service kind of business then. It was pure product company, which is an extension. And probably those companies were more like a bigger maintenance shop at that point in time. So when I came into the product company, probably that was the only company where they said, "Hey, you can tell me what your product idea is and build a product completely from scratch." And that's how I got into pure product development, building a completely new product from scratch. And over the years, I think after about maybe a less than about another 5 years, service companies took over, and we suddenly saw a shift from a product engineering mentality to a service delivery kind of a mentality. And then the scale happened because service is always about scale, right? And that's a major shift. And quite naturally, when that scale happened, more companies came. I mean, Bangalore grew, talent grew, etc., etc. But somewhere along the entire process, I think the depth also gets compromised because breadth happens. And then, of course, the more interesting thing over the last maybe a decade is areas in Bangalore becoming startup hubs. Suddenly now it gravitates where the Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Y generation now they start off being entrepreneurs and building stuff, which is pretty amazing. Actually, we are trying to get back into a quasi product platform service kind of an organization. So it's been a fairly interesting transformation. It is only that one of the growths that I always have about that particular growth is it destroyed Bangalore. It destroyed Bangalore not from the IT side. It destroyed Bangalore from the living piece. It destroyed Bangalore from a variety of other aspects, which I guess is simply part of the evolutionary cycle. But I guess the fire still burns in Bangalore.
That's true. So you mentioned that you're not a very that you like to live in the present and you're not too obsessed with the past or the future. But what do you believe the future of software QA will look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years, it's no more about doing. You probably will have to be more working on, and I guess in addition to evaluation of quality in terms of test and stuff, is about prevention to a lot more degree, a deeper kind of tests in something. So that means you are, you probably have to preempt and prevent issues as they come, ideate in terms of what it is, be much more closely connected to the market and people and their expectations, and not just function as an as an arm and a leg to find issues. And that is, in my opinion, a very, very strong shift. So I don't know if we would even call it as quality assurance because I don't know the name will fit in the typical sense because you're looking at it more like, hey, I'm able to, you know, see that this could go wrong. I see that this is what should be done and so on. So it could be a much more stronger co-creator rather than an evaluator.
Do you think there will ever be a point where you will not need to ever test or even like think that okay, do you think there will ever be a point where software is just going to come out like flawlessly? There was no problem, is no problem, will not there will not be any problem?
That's a great question. The reason is if you look back on the way we converse, the way we have gotten work done from machines, intellectual machines, is I guess we started off by saying, hey, here is a machine, I can only talk to it in ones and zeros. It can't understand my English or natural language. So we stooped down to the lowest level to kind of understand its ones and zeros. And that's how we started programming in assembly and other languages. And languages became more and more interesting and complex as time went by and so on. But still, we were talking in its language. The difference today is it is able to talk to us in its our language. That's what you see when you talk about the Gen AI and Chat GPTs and stuff. It's just able to converse with you. So now I don't need to now learn all the languages, all the intricacies what I had to do before, because it has graduated to my intellectual capability, to claiming to be my intellectual capability. So now, what's my role? My role has to elevate to the next level now, right? So which means I have to look at it from much more bigger problems to look at, maybe in terms of experiences at a higher level, impact to society and trust. How does it work in the larger context of environment? Things which are not the typically oft used software questions, right? And those are the things that I am going to worry about. So even I don't know if some of these terms like software engineer and assurance, it'll be interesting to know how the word itself evolves over time, because you're just now have a problem solving tool, and you don't have to stoop to that level. So will that change? Tremendously, yes. And it will democratize it to some degree, because a lot of people will be able to do a lot of stuff. So that's why I think when you look at, I don't know if you've read this World Economic Forum 2030 skills report, which is around. And if you go look at it, it's divided the whole thing into 4 quadrants. The quadrant number 4 being the skill that you need to worry about or have in 2030. And the diametrically opposite quadrant is the one which says, I don't think we need to worry about it. I don't know if you want to know that so much. What is in that quadrant which is there? I don't know if I really value.
No, sir, tell me.
One part is development, second part is quality control. What is there in the other quadrant, the quadrant 4? Systems thinking, critical thinking, human empathy, far more connected to technology savviness, and so on. Very interesting report, right? And that's naturally what we see. And I don't think we need to go too far, right? If you look at technology per se, I think maybe in the last 100 years or so, if you look at it, what did we do in technology? We first looked at motion, right? So we said, hey, I was going by, I was using my leg and a horse, and somebody said, here is a steam engine. Then somebody said, here's a diesel engine. So we looked at mechanical contraptions, which was what technology is all about.
Yeah.
Now, what we're doing is we are not doing any more locomotion related. We are doing intellectual ability related. So whatever skill sets that were required, maybe I was a horse driver. No, I don't require, I need to know. I have to become probably a pilot. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we are going to see the same parallels, because that's what technology does. Technology, by definition, is something that is constantly trying to throw you out. And it is trying to make certain things cheaper so that you can consume more and foster the business.
So, what do you think about vibe coding?
I think it's absolutely nice. Only because of that. But like any other technology assisted piece, the challenge is when you let go of your guard. When you think it is able to do so, I can relax and do nothing about it. That is when I think the problem happens, which is going to be there everywhere. It's like saying I have got airbags and everything safe in my car, and then I do something stupid, and of course I
Yeah.
have injury. So, may same sense, if I can work with the machine and wipe code so that we can build together, it's brilliant, because now I have the ability to have somebody who's extremely intelligent working with me closely. And if I'm able to have, be in the space that I'm not going to just blindly trust, then it's fine. So I think it's, a brilliant productivity enhancer for sure. But I guess, like everything that is there in technology, when somebody gives me something easy, I lower my guard. Right? If food can be done very quickly as fast food, I will eat a lot and I will become sick. I will put on weight.
Yeah.
That's natural. So I have to be careful with it. But I think that's the peril of any technology. But do you know there is, if you break that word called technology into two words, a second part, logos. You know what the meaning is? One of the meaning of logos is
I
I've
think
got a
I've come
series,
across it.
because I've got a series of poems on the techno dash logos, right? Logos is evil.
Yeah.
One of the meaning is evil.
Why?
So I,
Could you repeat that, sir?
when you break the word technology and look at techno and dash logos,
Yeah.
okay? Logos has many meaning. One of the meaning that I use is evil. Use in sense, I have a series of poems on the evils of technology. I like writing poetry, so I have a
Okay.
series of poems on
Can you
that.
tell us? Can you tell us a bit about that, sir?
No, technology is wonderful because it makes our life easier. That's what we all like to believe, and I think we practically use that in ways, amazing ways today. But everything has a state of balance. Everything has a state of yin and yang, right? And there, for every good, there is an equal important bad, right? So the balance is there as a part of natural stuff. So as much as the amazing part technology stuff, it has also got amazing amount of equal, stuff. So which I think we reasonably understand today from the social aspects of technology today, because people have got glued into their gaming boxes or social systems, and they have gone into depression when somebody takes it away. They become violent and stuff, and so on and so forth. Right? There are so many potential evils that, or it pollutes in some sense, and so on and so forth. So the logos actually means evil. So on one side, as much as I love technology, which is how I started off with my career, now I'm not sure of it, because technology is so damn powerful that all it takes is one stupid guy to derail the whole story. So I'm not anymore. I don't know if I have the same level of conviction with technology today, because it's democratized and it is extremely powerful. It's like, giving everybody a nuclear trigger to everybody. Right? That's kind of interesting. So I kind of pen some of my thoughts in that series of poems that I have, which I call as technologos, technology dashly.
What's your favorite poem that you've written out of that collection?
Oh, I don't think I can pick a favorite. Some of them have been on machines, some of them have been on social aspects, some of them they've always been a bit of a connection. There's a series that I have, but its series is still, it's not that it's done or something. I probably have about 10 of them, and I know I've got three or more ideas which I've not still worked on, but I don't know if I can pick a favorite in it. But all of them, all my poems resonate in the context of balance and yin and yang and mindfulness and presentness and so on and so forth.
So, do you read a lot?
That's how I keep my balance.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we were chatting about, and I think when stuff where we talked about, how do you balance? Other than, I think I told you some parts of it's not about business, it's not about technology, and it's not about glued to the act of business, right? It's also about doing a lot of other things. Some of which I mentioned as cycling and running. The other one is of course poetry and stuff, right? And I think the other interesting stuff is about just the books. So you just read randomly anything that you get. And of course, initially I used to read only specific technology books, then it graduated. Now I think I've broad based my approach in terms of what I read. So that's something that's fun. So I do have a very large personal collection too.
So, what is like a day in your workday look like? Considering that you're doing so much, what
No,
does it look like?
I work only from 9 to 6. So I'm a
All right.
no before that and after that. So I've been practicing that for the last 30 years. So I really, unless there's an extreme emergency, I don't touch anything outside of that. So I switch off completely. So of course, in the current, over the last maybe 12, 13 years, the mornings have been, because the kids have grown, some mornings have been related to, could be a walking, cycling, running, any of those kind of bit of a sporty piece. And the evenings have been spent in, writing, reading, watching, sometimes just doing nothing. Because doing nothing is terribly important too, because you have to learn to observe quite a bit. So that's how it is. And the day, certain amount of it is planned, and there's a lot of it which is unplanned, because I need that quiet space. So I think there's a lovely book that has been written about a few years ago, which is called Deep Work by a guy called Cal Newport, which became a bit popular. But where he talked about the notion of deep work, which is complicated in today's world. Because it's very difficult to be deep, because you've got 20 things that you're thinking of at the same time. The phone is going off, the mail is coming on, The messages are popping off, and so you're distracted like hell today, which was not there, frankly, 30 years ago for sure, right? So the depth was easier then, it's harder now. So, but how do you do less multiplexing and be deep? And how do you just have permanent silence for some time so that new things emerge? And that's something that's been, so that's something that I devote very constantly over every day or every weekend to actually possibly do nothing.
That sounds very fascinating. And the last question that I'd like to ask you is, if you could go back to your college days, what's one thing that you would tell your younger self?
I wish I'd studied humanities.
Why is that, sir? Why is that?
I think I did probably talk about a bit of technology and the logos part of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like technology, I love it. I'm deeply connected with it and so on. But it took me many years to kind of come out of the depth of technology in terms of a unidimensional thinking. Technology for, any engineering science to a large degree, in a way, I think the way you think is you think very logically. You're always solving a problem, you always have a goal, and you relentlessly pursue to solve the problem and make it good, which is what engineers are primarily, in my opinion, trained to. So you are reasonably unidimensional, right? So, but after now here, and after having spent learning other things over the last few years, where I've done a course on law, taken many sociology subjects and art subjects and humanities subjects as part of my study more recently, I suddenly find that you think very differently in other disciplines, which we aren't as much exposed to. Though I think in the current system of education, in the current engineering, there are other subjects, right, which people study. At that time, I didn't have. I only wish I had those because I probably would have been more broader in certain of my outlook then. So that's something that I always wish. I wish I studied humanities.
That's not what I expected. To be very frank with you, I did not expect that.
Yeah, because I think we all we see the other one thing that I kind of very very deeply believe and do is the sense of balance. And balance is the most hardest of the thing for all of us, right? Balance and variety of them. Balance could be in terms of how much time you work, how much time you do something else, how much you earn, how much you do it for fun, in any of these things, right? So how do you seek the balance? Because the balance require multiple dimensions. And that is really the higher order thinking that ultimately we do, right? And that requires, I think, one, a hardcore sense of doing, an equally hardcore sense of not doing, of just reflecting, of just quietly observing. And that is not something that comes naturally because you think it's a waste of time, right? And that's why I think slowly when you look at it, you start becoming philosophical, which I guess is part of the old age syndrome.
So I wouldn't say that. Considering everything that you're doing, I think you have more energy than most 20-year-olds out there.
No, I think the energy is nothing to do with physical. I think the fact that you probably are deeply connected in what you do as being joyful and being as present as possible is what I think makes it more interesting. Physically, of course, everything ages. Mentally, everything ages. But I guess it's really about. And if there is any fascinating book that you want to really connect onto these two dimensions of the physical self and the non-physical self, then maybe take a look at a book called The Biology of Belief. It's written by a hardcore genetic scientist called by whose name is Dr. Bruce Lipton. Written about maybe about I stumbled upon it I think about 10 years ago, and I like that book simply because I've experienced quite a lot of things that it says. And what it simply says, which I'm quite sure you've read it in very many different books. The belief changes the biology. So when I say belief changes biology, what it means is cells have the ability to change. That means if I had, let's say, a debilitating disease, so to speak, there have been known instances of where that has been healed not through a medication in a chemical sense, but a belief system that I am okay. very crudely put, though, right? So when you say about energy, right? Energy is a very internal thing from a belief system, in our opinion, and it works. And that's what I every time try to harness when you do this extreme long distance ride, which spans sometimes multiple nights and multiple days. So yeah, that's a fascinating thing. But yeah, physical equipments will break, including the bodies.
Well, sir, I must say this has been one of the most fascinating and inspiring conversations I've ever had. And I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast because this has been an absolute blast having you here.
Thank you so much, Adnan, for having me. It's been a pleasure. Um, thank you so much again. I hope I didn't
Thank
bore
you.
you too much with very long sentences and
No, no, nothing. I
Sure.
loved it. I loved it.
Thank you so much.